Human beings are social creatures, yet there is a noticeable difference between how women and men engage in friendship and emotional intimacy. Across cultures, women consistently demonstrate stronger social ties, richer networks of support, and more emotionally fulfilling friendships. In contrast, men are often more socially isolated, with many struggling to form and maintain close friendships, especially as they age. This disparity reveals both deep-rooted cultural conditioning and unaddressed emotional needs among men. Women tend to be more socially skilled, not because of innate biological differences alone, but largely due to how they were raised. From a young age, girls are encouraged to nurture relationships and value emotional closeness. As adults, this translates into friendships that are often more intimate, communicative, and mutually supportive. Women also tend to prioritize connection and community over competition, making it easier to form and sustain long-term bonds. By contrast, men are often socialized to value more independence and emotional restraint. Vulnerability is lamely seen as weakness, and emotional expression, particularly towards other men, is oftentimes discouraged. As a result, many men rely heavily on their romantic partners only for emotional support, leaving them particularly vulnerable to loneliness if those relationships struggle or end. Since we'll just come out and say that women are better socially than men, it's such that women typically even excel at relationship-based professions, such as nursing, while men who like to play with toys become mechanics or drivers or engineers or software developers so they can sit by themselves alone. We've spoken numerous times in the past about how women are more heart and men are more mind. The ability to reach out to a friend and open up and say, "Hey man, we should get together," is a heart-based activity and is thus more feminine. And the manly alpha macho conbro will often say or think, "I don't need to reach out, I'm good alone." The bro-lone, this curious term, this systematic poetry of our time, names a phenomenon not merely of male loneliness, but of existential drift. A psychocultural pathology hidden behind memes and muscle mass, keyboard warrioring in toxic forums, or behind podcast posturing and gym bro gospel. It is, in its essence, the wail of the wounded masculine psyche adrift in the postmodern echo chamber. Now let's understand, this is not an attack, but a diagnosis. The bro-lone, as we perceive it, is the man who has been stripped of myth or elderhood or authentic initiation into the mystery of what it means to be a man among beings. Instead, he's wandering a landscape devoid of soul, surrounded by pixelated idols of success. Lambos, OnlyFans, testosterone boosters, crypto stacks. And beneath this glittering emptiness is an ocean of unmet sorrow, a child's hunger for meaning dressed up in the Kevlar of performance. This becomes especially clear into later adulthood. As careers and family responsibilities and geographic moves increase, many men find it difficult to maintain friendships. Women form tight-knit, emotionally supportive circles. They vent, they hug, they send thoughtful texts and plan wine nights, thus often continuing to invest in relationships through regular contact and emotional sharing, while men may drift apart from friends due to neglect or discomfort with emotional intimacy. Over time, this leads to isolation and, of course, depression and a quiet crisis of disconnectedness that affects mental health and well-being. Thus, if you look at the stats of most men, as they age, they spend more and more time alone. And then into their golden years, if they're still married, their wives tell their friends, of which they have more, that their husband has no friends. This is not new, mind you. The crisis of the masculine has been unfolding for decades, centuries even. Since the sacred rites of passage were replaced by heavily departmentalized capitalism, external individualism, Americanized rural areas and suburbs, both stupidly built primarily around the automobile, with usually single individuals in their separate boxes on wheels, not to mention other things such as modern-day diplomas or paychecks or even war. Layered now with the digital acceleration of anti-social media and algorithmic isolation, it has reached an absolute fever pitch because one can easily spend all of their free time online in front of screens, which the oligarchs want you to have as little time as possible of because of how much they work you to the bone. And that's not even to mention the drug of mass multiplayer gaming. This is a global problem, but it is most amplified in countries which have the most grueling work schedules. So it's bad in the US and it's even worse in Japan, for example. Relationships and making them and maintaining them is work. And many men, often tired from their slave jobs, are not willing to put in the work as much as women are. And this is something that men need to accept as their fault. Speaking personally, We have buddies we've known from growing up, who we see on occasion, but some of whom we personally only see maybe once or twice a year at most. And that is only because of our spouses being friends. The women maintain those relationships. Our old schoolmates are stoked to see us when they do, but at the same time, they are unwilling to put in the work themselves. A lot of friendships are actually quite fragile and are always a two-way street. So it goes without saying that when you do reach out to a friend to get together socially, and they don't do the same nearly as often or not at all, well then just after 2 or 3, I've called them, it's their turn to call me's, the relationship pauses or slows, and then before you know it, it's been 6 months or 2 years and you really don't have a continuing friendship anymore. We think anyone listening to this has probably experienced similar. So another one is neighbors. If you have crappy or disrespectful or psycho neighbors, that sucks. If you have nice, cool neighbors into your 30s and 40s and later in life, maybe with kids similar ages, then amazing. But even with them, both my wife and I, who have a quite decent network of people we know, are constantly amazed by how few neighbors reciprocate invitations. We know handfuls of kids who always want play dates together, and then the dads are like, no, we can't, or I've got something else to do, or they say, yeah, we should catch up, but then what they really mean is never. Yet in reality, building friendships with others in your neighborhood who have kids around your same child's age can be priceless. The dads who don't put the work in, even via building relationships on behalf of their children, some of us other dads, while are social and do put the work in, replace the unsocial dads' last names with Brolone. There goes Nick Brolone, who I know this weekend is going to only be sitting on the couch by himself watching Netflix or The Game, while his daughter is also alone and less happy because of it. The male psyche, once tied to land or tribe or cosmology, is now drifting in a matrix of mirrors reflecting only the self, and it's lonely. Not just lonely for connection, though surely it is, but lonely for purpose, for depth, for a place in the grand story. The bro lone chugs his protein and benches his weights, not because he is strong, but because he lacks mental strength and is terrified of being nothing at all. And as we'll surely get more into in this series, often then adheres to dark red pill ideology, not because it enlightens, but because it offers a structure in the void of hollowness. It is, in other words, a poor, piss poor substitute for the mystery. Because without myth, without any sort of numinous anchor of the living earth and a living spirit, the male mind loops itself into absurdity. And also, so becomes a caricature, retreating into the digital harems and manosphere priests. He seeks transcendence only through dominion because he has not figured out that the true strength is in building real community. Not via a dark imperial hate church, although praise to any open-minded system, religious or secular, which brings community together. Which, by the way, will then result in a longer and more healthy life. As one of the primary ingredients of blue zones, places like Okinawa in Japan, which are regions in the world where people are claimed to have exceptionally long lives beyond the age of 100 oftentimes, is continuing rich social interactions all the way through their lives. As a somewhat professional and somewhat hobby documentary filmmaker, our close and adjacent hobby is a form of documentary photography, street photography. And we'll never forget this shot we took in the early morning in a walk in Barcelona of about 30 old gray-haired dudes standing around a fountain, who would obviously had all met up regularly at this location, easily walkable to in their 15-minute city, mind you, to drink their coffee and socialize. And one of the main things we think of when looking back at this picture of them laughing and chuckling is these guys are going to live a long time. Way more than the lonely old-timer we spoke of earlier who has no friends and just hangs out in his garage. Okinawan elders, for example, belong to Moai, a lifelong social group that offers emotional and practical support. So they literally have built-in friends for life. Meanwhile, the average American man at over 50 has fewer close friendships than ever before, and many have zero. So the solution, if one dares to propose it, is not to ridicule, nor another prescription of norms. It is encouraging men to put work into relationships. So reach out to your old friends, even if it's awkward. Or even better, make new ones. As men's tendency to spend too much time alone is not simply a personality trait, it's a cultural failure to teach emotional intelligence and empathy and the value of sustained connection. Loneliness is not weakness. It's a signal. It's a social and spiritual hunger that needs addressing. To bridge the gap, society must do more to encourage emotional education for boys, challenging harmful regressive gender stupidity, and create spaces where men can safely cultivate friendships of vulnerability and trust. In doing so, we not only improve men's lives, we strengthen the societal fabric of all. And beyond even that, there must be a future cultural reckoning, a renaissance of the masculine as steward, as visionary, and as lover of life, not as the CEO or the influencer, with initiation rites that do not involve hazing or humiliation, but maturely and sophisticatedly say, you are more than your cock and your cash. You are a carrier of dreams, a sculptor of meaning, and a mirror of the infinite. Until then, the bro lone shall roam aimlessly, looking for the brothers in the gym and finding only echoes, looking for God in the alpha advice and finding only hunger. And so, with compassion, we must call him in, not to tame him, but to wake him, not to shame him, but to show him. The journey inward is the way outward, which will externally then result in better co-masculine communal connections.